So today I'm going to talk about variance in beauty, which was actually based off of a typeface I designed, as well as some other thoughts that I had during the process and after the process of the typeface design. So when considering the multitudes of typeface choice on the market, how does one approach the challenge of designing a typeface that is different from the competition? With the abundance of typeface choices, why is there a need for yet another typeface to be designed? These are valid questions when approaching the creative process of typeface design. There is the potential to have as many typefaces as there are people in the world, meaning the possibilities are endless in the personalities and function of typefaces, and they have the potential to grow along with the population. When designing typeface design, one has to acknowledge that to design type is to design language. As a designer of language, one must consider legibility, readability, beauty, form, versatility, and utility. It is no easy feat to design a typeface that is beautiful and practical and has many applications, i.e. headlines, body copy, etc. But to design a typeface that confronts the notions of what beauty and practicality are, along with pushing the unspoken rules of what language should look like, is something altogether different. How does a type designer approach designing a typeface when there is a gluttonous market of typefaces to begin with? There are thousands of typefaces on the market, all making claims of being quirky, nostalgic, or even adventurous. One approach might be to redesign an existing typeface, such as the case of Garamond. In existence is Simoncini, Adobe, Monotype, Berthoud, ITC, and Stempel, to name a few iterations and foundries, not to mention all the derivatives such as Sebon and Grandjean. Given the choice between the task of designing something beautiful and established or something new and perhaps ugly, one might take the latter route and strive for a different set of challenges. The typeface Motorix, which is a typeface I designed a few years ago, answers this approach to typeface development by challenging the rules of form, beauty, and function, all the while pushing the limits of what language looks like. The Latin, or Roman alphabet, as it stands today, has undergone centuries of change and evolution, which has resolved itself to current norms and letter form recognition. What will our letter forms look like in another couple of centuries? Will the letter A still look the same? Will there be new letter forms added or old ones removed? What can the letter A look like? With the typeface Motorix, these questions are considered along with how the expectation of aesthetics and practicality drive the finished product. Motorix defies the rules of typical motifs of what is beautiful. The notion of beauty was immediately thrown out in the initial sketch stages of Motorix, as you can see in the top slide. Through the manipulation, elongation, and distortion of anatomical typographic parts, Motorix was born. The goal was to not create another Bodoni lookalike, but to stretch the imagination and limits of what language can look like and question what beauty can and cannot be. If something is aesthetically pleasing, does that automatically make it beautiful? What about aesthetically interesting or alternatively appalling? Could it still be beautiful? Notions of beauty are a heavily contested subject in the art and design world, with many artists and designers challenging what beauty is in their work. Does Motorix encompass beauty by today's standards? That is for the consumer to decide and for scholars to debate. Form follows function, as the principle taught during the 20th century says. Motorix functions because of its form, with letter forms that are interchangeable, and variants creating thousands upon thousands of letter combinations. The letter forms have dynamic humanistic qualities that elicit a futuristic musical quality. Upbeat and spunky, and with a click of the mouse to change the stylistic set, one can venture into letter form combinations hard to imagine with infinite possibilities. These variants represent the power of language and the stylistic parameters that type designers now hold with tools such as OpenType, stylistic sets, and a little bit of imagination. To truly embrace the typeface design process, one must look back at the history and origins of language. If we want to truly look back to the beginning, we can view the cave drawings of Lascaux 20,000 years ago as a portrayal of early language. Through depictions of large animals drawn with mineral pigments, ideas were communicated and shared amongst the inhabitants. Fast forward a few thousand years, and we arrive at 3000 BC with the proto-cyanatic pictogram of an ox, a simplified drawing which represented strength, energy, and vitality, the one on the left. What were our ancestors trying to say to one another through this ideogram? The same as the inhabitants of Maccaux, the eventual transformation from pictogram to ideogram was a major step in transferring the notion of drawing something to showing an idea. From there, the letter A goes through the process of simplification, rotation, and eventually the horns of the ox, or the bottom feet of the A, as we know it, lands itself on its head, so to speak. The horns now ground themselves into the earth with stable footing, and we have our modern letter A. After years of transformation, what will language look like in a couple hundred years from now? Well, the way language is currently being used with the advent of mobile devices and the web, we can see the speed and efficiency take precedence in modern communication. Through the abbreviation of words via SMS messages and the advent of emoji, will we eventually need written language at some point? Will we divest to the most basic of communication, which goes back to pictograms like that of the Egyptians? Staying with the latest technology, Apple has the addition of the entire Emoji Touch Bar in their latest MacBook Pro. With the tap of a finger, one can easily access iOS emoji to add to their emails, documents, and messaging. The ease of use of these emojis have become mainstream and ubiquitous in shorthand for otherwise lengthy messages. Can one truly sum up their feelings into that of a smiley face emoji? The prevalence of modern-day icon-based language system is also seen on the social network Facebook, which has, in recent years, added emoji to status updates as not only a way to like someone's post, but to give us more options to comment wow or sad via the corresponding emoji. Do we as a society embody the modern-day equivalent of the digital version of Egyptian hieroglyphics? New words are constantly being added to the Oxford Dictionary as our language changes and evolves. What about new additions to the Latin alphabet? One such not so new development is the Interrobang, which was designed back in 1962 by an owner and copywriter from an advertising agency. His intent was to communicate the notion of surprise and rhetorical questioning all in one mark. In 1968, the Interrobang's appearance on Remington Rand's Model 25 typewriter gave the mark a new legitimacy and ease of use overnight. The symbol went dormant for many years thereafter and has, in recent years, gained a revival of sorts, showing up in new typefaces such as Jeremy Maccaux's router. As it turns out, there is no such thing as one single basic, essential, universal, archetypal, and pure skeleton of an A, says Jens Gelher in his Compendium of Alphabets, a System of Letter Shapes from CalArts. This is an interesting notion as we can all agree upon the general shape of the letter A. There are many variations of the shape as well as the various types of classification, cursive, serif, sans serif, etc. But we can all agree that the Latin letter A has an apex where two lines join and a crossbar. How will this letter form evolve over the next 100 years? Will it evolve at all, or will our current language, Latin language, change into something entirely different, such as a pictorial-based language, such as emoji? An alternative spin and usage of the Latin language and alphabet can be seen in the cattle drivers of the 19th century from the western and southwestern regions of the United States, as well as Mexico. These cattlemen learned that by utilizing branding irons to mark and keep track of their cattle, they could detract thieves from stealing their stock and show proof of ownership. These brands included letter forms, numerals, and pictograms, but with a spin. Taking the Latin alphabet, but altering it by making variations of each letter to represent crazy, lazy, running, walking, tumbling, and flying, to name a few, these ranchers created their own language. Turning the letter A upside down denoted a crazy A, whereas the letter A on its side meant it was a lazy A. Feet were added to letter forms to denote walking, as well as more cursive stylized script to denote running. These were also incorporated into their wheelhouse of letter forms. There were certain rules to the order in which one would read the brand, always from top to bottom, outside to inside, and left to right. The picture at left is an actual branding iron that I bought in downtown Reno from an antique shop. This is a current typeface I'm working on, and I wanted to understand how the cattlemen actually built the branding irons using the metal. So these brands were a stepping stone for modern-day branding, a language today that is global and continues to evolve. The beauty of branding is that it distills the meaning into simple imagery, making a language in itself. Comic Sans. At the end of the day, isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder? As a society, we are told via advertising and messaging what is designated as beautiful and how to attain that status. In the type world, Comic Sans often gets a derogatory designation of being ugly and is an outlier and often rife for ridicule. But perhaps there is a place for what we perceive or label as ugly. The general public has done just that for Comic Sans, utilizing it in everyday items such as menus, invitations, signage, and even gravestones. Maybe ugly is the new beautiful, or perhaps it is just over and misappropriated. Does it still communicate and get the message across? If the general public likes it, maybe it has some validity and beauty has nothing to do with it. With preconceived notions of what beauty and language should look like in today's society, it is easy to get lost in the form and lose track of the meaning or function of typography. Can a typeface challenge the norms of what language looks like and how we perceive it? What is beauty, and can it inform the viewer to buy a product, give to charity, or see the world differently? The hope, being a type designer and a designer of language, is that audiences can be reached through language and typography, and an impact can be made, be it good, bad, beautiful, or ugly. It will be interesting to see where language will go in the next millennium, and if we as a society end up going full circle back to where it all began, using simple drawings to convey meaning. Thank you.